Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. In an important judgment, the Supreme Court on August 11th held that daughters would have equal rights to inherit ancestral property as sons in a Hindu undivided family, saying the amendment in law in 2005 would have a retrospective effect. It said the daughters would have coparcenary rights in joint Hindu family property even if the father died before the Hindu Succession Amendment Act of 2005. A bench of Justices Arun Mishra, S. Abdul, Nazeer and M.R. Shah said that the provisions contained in the substituted Section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act of 1956 conferred the status of coparcener on the daughter born before or after amendment in the same manner as a son with the same rights and liabilities. In this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Hindu succession law and daughters' rights. Joining me on the program today are Deepak, Advocate of the Supreme Court, P.K. Malhotra, former Secretary, Ministry of Law and Justice, Government of India, and Rekha Agarwal, Advocate of the Supreme Court. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. All right, Rekha Agarwal, I'd like to start the program with you first. Let's understand the ruling of the Supreme Court and what it means really as far as the Hindu succession law and the rights of the daughters are concerned.
Very simply, Frank, if I may put it in simple words for all the viewers, the recent judgment in the case of Vinita versus Rakesh passed by the Honorable Supreme Court last Tuesday has clarified, or rather made it very clear, that the amendment to the Hindu Succession Act, which took place in the year 2005, would have a retrospective effect regarding the rights of daughters in the ancestral property of their fathers. In simple words, prior to 2005 amendment in the Hindu Succession Act, Section 6, the girls were not, or the daughters were not given the status of a coparcener in the Hindu undivided family. And the sons who were born, that is 3 degrees, or up to 3 degrees, that is the son, the father, and the grandfather. In that way, the distribution of the property took place. However, in the year 2005, an amendment was made to the Hindu Succession Act, particularly Section 6, and it was clarified that daughters born after 2005, that is 9/9/2005, would get the same share in the property of their fathers and their grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers, which was identical or in parity with their brothers. A problem arose subsequent to the passing of the judgment. In fact, there were conflicting judgments. And in the case of Prakash versus Fulvati, which was a judgment passed by the Honorable Supreme Court, this particular judgment, as well as another judgment in the case of Damanna versus Amar, this view was passed. And it was not very clear as to whether a daughter who had been given this right after 2005, would she get this right even if her father was not alive on the date that she was born, or rather after this amendment was passed? So because of this conflicting judgment that was passed, the Honorable High Court of Delhi also followed the judgment passed in the case of Prakash versus Fulvati, and therefore there was need for this matter to be referred to a larger bench of the Honorable Supreme Court, and that is why 3 judges decided this matter. And they have put at rest the entire controversy, which had, though in 2005, the benefit of inheritance had been conferred to the daughters, but despite the passing of this judgment, as I just mentioned, Frank, not many daughters were able to enjoy the benefits of the amendment of 2005 because it was not very clear whether the daughter had to be born prior to 9/9/2005, whether her father had to be alive on the date that she was born or on the date when the amendment was passed, that on 9/9/2005. Therefore, this recent judgment has set at rest the entire controversy, all the ifs and buts that used to rise up. Whenever a daughter asked for a share in her father's property, whenever the brothers or the rest of the family members wanted to deprive any daughter of a share in the ancestral property, there would be lots of questions and controversies which would be set up. However, now the Supreme Court has clarified that the amendment of 2005 will have a retrospective effect, meaning thereby that a daughter could have been born on any date at all. And in fact, the date that she is born, she gets a right, it's rather a birthright Just as, freedom is a birthright, a daughter also has a right to claim partition of the ancestral property as a matter of right. It is in fact, the words that have been used by the Honorable Supreme Court are that she gets an unobstructed inheritance right in the ancestral property. There can be no obstruction raised at all. So, in simple words for the viewers, any daughter born in a Hindu undivided family which is following the Mitakshara law, the moment a daughter is born, or rather, if I may go one step behind and say that the moment a daughter is even conceived in the womb of her mother, she gets the right which is equal to that of her brother in the Hindu undivided family of her father, irrespective of the date that she was born, whether she was born before 9/9/2005, whether she was born after that, whether her father was alive on 9/9/2005,
right,
or whether he had passed away. So all those controversies have been set at rest. In plain, simple words, unobstructed inheritance right is conferred to the daughters, and they are now treated as equal co-parceners, equal to their brothers in the Hindu undivided family, and they get an equal right in both the immovable as well as the immovable property left behind by their fathers.
All right, Mr. Malhotra, let me bring you into the picture now. You heard what the first panelist has said. Now let's look back at the law, go back to 2005 and try and understand why was the law amended in the first place, and has the Supreme Court now corrected a wrong of the past?
I think Madam Rekha Agarwal has very clearly pointed out why there was a need for a reference to the Constitution bench of 3 judges in this Vinita Sharma's case, which was decided by the Supreme Court on 11th of August 20, because there were conflicting verdict of the 2 division benches of the Supreme Court, one in Fulvati's case and other in the Danamma's case, and that caused a lot of confusion with regard to the interpretation given to Section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act 1956. In fact, the Hindu Succession Act of 1956, for the first time, codified the law with regard to succession, which was already there under the Vedic laws and under the Shastras, which were prevalent, and the concept of coparcenary was, or the Hindu divided family, or joint Hindu family was in existence even prior to that also. Now, just talking, why I'm saying codified, because as I said, the Mitakshara, there were 2 schools of Hindu law. That is the Mitakshara school of law, which was prevalent in the northern part of the country, another part, and the Deyabhaga school of law, which was prevalent in Assam and Bengal. In fact, the Hindu Succession Act of 1956 codified the Mitakshara law, and under the Mitakshara law, the co-parceners are only the male members in the family. The female members are not co-parcener, and they don't have right. Now, for the benefit of my viewers, because some of the viewers may not be law-knowing person, so there is a difference between the joint Hindu family and the co-parcenary. The joint Hindu family is a larger term, and coparcenary is a narrower term. In the joint Hindu family, you have male members, you have mother, you have wife, you have unmarried daughter. Whereas in coparcenary, it is a micro unit of the joint Hindu family, and it consists of only male members of 3 generations. That is the son, grandson, and great grandson. I mean, the 3 categories are there who inherit the property from the, and it doesn't go beyond that. And this ownership is a joint community of interest and unity of possession in the coparcenary. It is only when the division takes place, then you go further. Now, the law which was in the Mitakshara school of Hindu law was codified under the Hindu Succession Act in 1956. And because there was a difference so far as the inheritance is concerned, then the inheritance under the coparcenary law was only available to the male members, and there was a discrimination so far as the women are concerned. This law was amended in 2005, and the daughters were also given equal rights under this law, which was amended in 2005. By the amendment made in 2005, the daughters were recognized as coparcener, or joint legal heir for partition arising from 2005 onward. Section 6 also made daughters co-parcener by birth. Mind it, it is very important. They made it co-parcener by birth in their own right. And the law also gave daughters some rights and same rights and liabilities in coparcenary property as she would have had she been a son. And why these reforms were brought? Because the Law Commission in its 174th report discussed about the discrimination against the daughter so far as the inheritance of property is concerned, and based on the recommendation of the made by the Law Commission of India in its 174th report, these reforms were brought. In addition, the states of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra had in fact already made certain amendments in this law by seeking assent of the president under the constitution, and modified law was applicable in these states. So because there was a confusion created by the two judgments of the division bench, which Madam Rekha Agarwal has already mentioned, the Supreme Court in this constitutional bench settled the law and expanded the intention of the legislature, that is to remove the discrimination as contained in section 6 of the act by giving equal right to daughter in the Hindu Mitakshara coparcenary property as the sons had. So if I have to say in one sentence, what I will say that the constitution bench, what was implicit in the law by amendment in 2005 has been made explicit by the court in its judgment. And I think the position already affected now cannot be disturbed, and I think the daughters now also get equal right by way of the clarification which the Supreme Court has given by a constitution bench, and it has said that all cases which are pending in various courts, including the High Court and the District Court, now should be settled as per the law declared by the Supreme Court.
Okay, points taken. Let me take the points that you're taking forward with Sai Deepak now. So Sai, is this another step in the direction of achieving equality or total equality?
No, I think two things have effectively happened as a consequence of this particular judgment. One is that the intention of the legislature through the amendment of 2005, which is to say that since a position is recognized by birth itself as a coparcener, and that particular position was captured to a clear effect, or at least to some degree in the amended section 6, the court is effectively saying if the intention of the legislature is to ensure that the right is devolved upon birth itself and the status of a coparcener depends effectively on the birth of a certain coparcener, what is the point in limiting the scope of that particular right depending on the, let's say, the birth or the living status of the parent whose right is actually devolving? So the question was very simple. If a boy becomes a coparcener upon birth and a male heir becomes a coparcener upon birth, the intention of the amendment of 2005 was to vest the same status on a girl thanks to that particular amendment. Okay, and that particular status is not affected in any manner on whether or not the father is available or let's say is alive at the time of the amendment of September 2005. So that was the limited question that the court had to answer. The second question that the court has significantly answered is whether it is possible for an oral deed of partition to be given effect to, and the court has come to the very clear conclusion that as far as an oral deed of partition is concerned, it cannot be recognized except in exceptional circumstances when the plea of oral partition is clearly supported by any other public document and can be given effect to and can be corroborated, in the absence of which it needs to be a statutory, let's say it should satisfy the statutory requirements of a clear deed, a written deed, which clearly recognizes the right of partition. So the two clear consequences, in fact, what has happened is, this judgment of the Supreme Court is not a radical departure from another 2018 judgment of the Supreme Court delivered in Danamma versus Amar in 2018. In fact, out of the multiple judgments which were giving different interpretations to the same provision, the current judgment is largely in sync with the previous two judgment delivered in 2018 by Justice A.K. Sikri and Justice Ashok Bhushan. So I think what the court has done is to ensure that there is clarity as far as the status of the female heir is concerned, which is directly related to her birth and which has got nothing to do with the living status or the death of the person from whom the property devolves. Okay. So for all practical purposes, I would say that the intention of the legislature of the 2005 amendment has been given clear effect. That would be my position.
All right, Mr. Malhotra, you have a point to make. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Madam Rekha Agarwal mentioned about the retrospective effect of the judgment. I think the court, while deciding this issue, has dealt with the issue very clearly, and they have not said that it is a retrospective effect. What they have said, it has got a retroactive effect. Now, what is this retroeffective effect? Retrospective effect means that the judgment in all cases will apply from backdate. Prospective means it will apply only prospective, not apply to the decisions already taken. But retroactive means if there is an exception carved out in it, which Sai Deepak has also mentioned, and that exception was if suppose before 9/9/2005, when the amendment was carried out, if already by a deed of partition, the property has already been divided by a registered deed. In that case, that partition will not be effective. So, to that extent, the judgment is not retrospective, it is only retroactive in the sense if the deed of partition has already been not executed as per the provision of amended law, then it will apply. But otherwise, the deed of partition is sacrosanct, that cannot be touched, and because the partition has already taken place. Yeah, that is a point, which I wanted to clarify.
May I just clarify? Sir, may I just clarify over here?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Mr. Malhotra, in fact, the recent judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court has given the date of December 2004. All those partitions have taken place till December 2004. Those will not be affected. And as Sai Deepak also said, that those registered partition deeds, which satisfy all the requirements of law, those will not be touched in any manner whatsoever by either the amendment of 2005 or by the recent judgment. So unless, of course, an oral partition is being pleaded by any of the parties, which will have to meet the strict requirement of law, and the strict evidence will be required to prove that an oral partition had taken place.
Absolutely. All right. So, Sai Deepak, let me also bring you in, since we're talking about a few technicalities. So the daughter now is a coparcener, but a daughter who is married is a member of both families, her own family and also her husband's family. So what happens in a case like that? And to make it a little more complicated, what if the husband passes away? Then what happens?
No, strictly speaking, whether the husband passes away or not is it doesn't make any difference to the rights that she is supposed to receive as a co-parcener from a father's property. Okay. And the husband's right is only with respect to his father's property and what he may be entitled to from his father. Okay. But whether or not the daughter is married doesn't make any difference. So to answer your question, when the amendment was introduced, the change of Gotra as a consequence of the marriage has had no impact on the rights of the daughter. And just to connect both the points made by the other two panelists, let's be very, very clear. What the court has said, and as Mr. Malhotra rightly pointed out and what Madam clarified, is that the right comes into effect from September 9th, 2005 with respect to those deeds in which a partition has not been effected yet, regardless of whether the father is alive or not. Therefore, there could be a situation that the father may have passed away in 99 or in 2001, but an actual deed of partition or the act of partition has not been taken place or has not taken place, and subsequently you have the amendment of September 2005, as a consequence of which the daughter gets the right to ask for her particular share of that particular property from that particular date, because you see, at the end of the day, no judgment can have the effect of reopening all those deeds of partitions which have been given effect on all those proceedings which have achieved a certain degree of quietus. There is no canon of law which permits that. So therefore, the simple question is, when does the daughter get the right to raise this red flag saying, I have a right? Second, with respect to what kind of deeds and in what circumstances? Third is the question of, in the absence of a partition deed, in the absence of something that has been reduced to writing, what are the remedies available where an exception has been created with respect to publicly available documents? This right is available regardless of her marital status. She can be a widow, she can be married, or she can be a spinster. Doesn't make a difference to her right.
Okay. Talking about rights now, Mr. Malhotra, what are the rights of a co-parcener? Let's understand that too.
You see, the coparcener, as I said, they continue for a 3 degrees. That is the son, grandson, and the great son. It is only up to 3 degrees. And it is the undivided interest in the property which a coparcener has. The moment a partition takes place, then of course it becomes his individual property after the partition. But before that, it is a joint interest in the property. And if it is a joint interest in the property, then only after the division it gets crystallized. Before that, it doesn't crystallize thereafter. Then under succession also, it is not only section 6 which is relevant. Section 8 is also relevant because that talks about how the interest of the person who has died, his share will be divided. Now take for example, there is a father and there are son. Father is A, son and B and C. If without this, any other document, in case the father dies, the property will devolve on B and C under the prior law, and the daughter will get her right only under section 8 and not under section 6. But now the kind of clarification which the Supreme Court has given, now she will also be a equal partner in the property. Otherwise, she will get, what will happen under section 8? She will get only 1/3 portion of the father's property because other 2/3 will be taken 1/3 each by the 2 sons. But now after, if in the joint interest, what she get, because they become 3 persons, so she get total 1/3 in the whole property. I've given this example just to clarify from the point of view of the person who doesn't understand the nitty-gritty of the law, so that they can also understand as to how the property is divided. So in co-personally, it is undivided interest, but the moment there is a partition deed, then of course it becomes an individual interest of that person, and it can be disposed of under the normal law of succession.
Okay, so after the amendment, of course, there are probably several cases that have come out. There are probably several daughters who have just been given, a little bit of money and asked to keep quiet. Rekha Agarwal, let me bring you in now. So does this mean that, after this particular verdict of the Supreme Court, litigation will go up? We'll see more women probably knocking on the doors of the court, saying that, they have not been given their due.
Frank, that is, I guess, going to be an unfortunate event if a lot of litigation is increased, in any of the courts throughout our country. What I would rather expect that, in a more holistic manner, the families would sit together and give the daughter her legitimate dues. I think that would be in the correct spirit. And I'm quite certain that the Honorable Supreme Court did not have this in mind when they passed this historic judgment last Tuesday. And that was not the view that the Supreme Court would have had, that we are going to increase the litigation, or we are going to create a fracas in the family in the family behavior of the people. I think all issues don't get settled in the court, and now mediation has become a very, very important and integral part of the litigation system. I think we should look at this judgment in a more holistic manner. And all the people who are now aware of this judgment and who have daughters or who have sisters now should realize that simply marrying of the daughter and sending her into another family doesn't cut her off. The umbilical cord doesn't get cut simply because you're married off your daughter. And by saying that, in fact, the general view of the public is that once a daughter gets married, she gets a right in her husband's, she's going to get double the right. She'll get her father's right and she'll get her husband's right. No, that is not the case. A wife does not get a right of inheriting her husband's property, as long as the husband is alive. All that a wife is entitled to claim from a husband is the right of maintenance, that is food, clothing and shelter, as long as a husband is alive. It is for the husband to claim his right in the property, as Sai Deepak also mentioned. A husband can claim his right from his father. Why deny a daughter the right to claim a share in her father's property only because A, she's married, or she's a divorcee, or if she's a spinster, then all that she has got a right to claim is food, clothing and shelter, but she doesn't get a right of ownership. That is a kind of thought process, a very unfortunate thought process, which is there in the minds of most people, that an unmarried daughter, why does she need any property at all in any case? Why should she have the right of ownership? She is living happily along with her brothers in the Hindu joint family. She should not be claiming any right of ownership. I think that mindset has to change. I personally, as a lawyer, would not encourage daughters to go running to the court and ask for partition. I think it would be in a more positive manner. I think the family should get together, decide that what is the legitimate due that a daughter has in the family property, and give her share in a more graceful manner. And if that is, if that does not happen, instead of running to the court and filing suits for partition, I think daughters, sisters, wives, whoever they are, they should approach the mediation center. There we have what is called alternate dispute resolution mechanism in our litigation process now. We have the mediation centers, and even we have something which is called as pre-litigation mediation. So instead of filing a case for partition and spoiling the harmony of the family, and disrupting all the relations, I think it would be better if the family partition doesn't take place across the table in a in a holistic manner. Then the next alternative would be to go to the mediation centers, apply for what is called pre-litigation mediation, and see if the problem can be solved, in a constructive manner. And if that doesn't happen, then ultimately it is for a daughter to decide whether she wants to give up something, out of her own volition, or is she giving up her right in the property because of some other pressures of her brothers or because of any other family peer pressure. So I think that something which has been given to you by birth, a daughter is not getting a right in her father's property as a matter of charity. Her brothers are not doing a charity upon it. It is not a charitable deed. It is not a charitable exercise that they're doing. It is her birthright. On the contrary, I think that instead of just forsaking your right in your father's property and saying, oh, I don't want it, I think instead of being so magnanimous about it, I think a daughter should claim it. If her brothers are comfortable financially, she should claim her right. Whether she wants it for herself or whether she wants to give it away for a charitable cause, that is another matter. But increase of litigation is certainly not the view that the Supreme Court had in mind.
Okay, I like your optimism. I hope that everybody else also shares your optimism and we don't see litigation go up. Jesai, Deepak, time to get a closing comment now from you, concluding remarks, and also what does this mean for the Hindu Undivided Family?
Just to clarify also, and to add to the points made before, that in the event that the daughter dies, then her surviving family, if she happened to be a married daughter, then her husband also gets the right to invoke the right of coparcener on behalf of the wife. Or even if she gets incapacitated as a consequence of being of unsound mind, I would assume that as the next friend and the next of kin, he would be in a position to invoke those rights. That's equally there. See, frankly, I think it's a fantastic move forward. And if a family feels that they have to part with something to a daughter even after she gets married, well, the good news is when your son gets married, then your daughter-in-law gets rights in her father's property also. Okay, so it's ek haath de ek haath liye. So I don't see how this is effectively a quid pro quo in one particular direction. So the good thing is, have a daughter as well as a son. It's good for the country. So all I can say is this is a very progressive way forward. And finally, we have some quietus. More than anything else, imagine that an amendment which came out in 2005 gets clarity finally in 20, 15 years down the line. So it's meant a lot of heartburn for a lot of time and pockets of people like me, practitioners. So let's hope that they don't have to do this any further.
Okay, all right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. A step in the right direction, and finally we've seen something being corrected that was done 15 years ago is what the panelists are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.